It all started with a simple letter. Tucked inside the mailbox of a quiet suburban farmstead sat a notice from the local HOA, full of demands, warnings, and veiled threats. To them, it was just another rule to enforce, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Behind the white fence and rows of vegetables lived someone they never expected. A former Navy commander turned single mom, raising her son and running a small, peaceful farm. Her days were spent tending goats, teaching her kid, and healing from a past few people knew about. The HOA saw weeds, a shed 2 inches too tall, and chickens that clucked a little too loudly. What they didn't see was the strength, discipline, and sharp instincts of a woman trained to lead under pressure. They thought she'd fold like the others. They were wrong. As the warnings escalated, so did her quiet resistance. She knew the rules, maybe better than the board itself, and she had no intention of backing down. With her military past hidden behind soft-spoken words and a calm smile, she began documenting everything, preparing for a battle on paper rather than on a battlefield. But what triggered the HOA to target her in the first place? Was it really about code violations, or something more? Stick around, because this story is just getting started. Before the letters started piling up, the farm had been a quiet corner of peace. Tucked at the edge of a well-manicured neighborhood, the small property wasn't flashy, just a modest home, a few raised garden beds, a chicken coop, and a weathered barn that housed rescued animals. Most neighbors waved politely, though some gave side glances when they passed. Maybe it was the way her yard didn't look like the others. Maybe it was her refusal to join in HOA socials. Or maybe it was just that she didn't fit their picture of normal. Her name was Commander Rachel Hayes, though she rarely used her rank anymore. After 15 years in the Navy, she'd stepped away to focus on her son and build something grounded, something real. She chose this property for the freedom it promised, space to grow food, raise animals, and live quietly. She wasn't looking for trouble. But the HOA had other ideas. It started with a complaint about a non-compliant fence. Then, a warning about unauthorized livestock, code for her chickens. Each letter came with deadlines and threats of fines. At first, she tried to reason with them. She attended meetings, asked questions. But the board members, some polite, some smug, made it clear they weren't interested in compromise. What made them really zero in on her farm, though, remained unclear. Rachel kept her routine steady, early mornings feeding the animals, homeschooling her son, and evenings spent fixing things around the property. But the pressure from the HOA was creeping in, like a slow leak she couldn't patch. One day it was a notice about her barn's paint color being inconsistent with community standards. Another day, it was a complaint about her son's tire swing being unsafe and unsightly. It felt personal now. Too specific. Too frequent. Behind closed doors, board members exchanged emails. Some viewed Rachel as a disruption, a woman who challenged their authority by simply not conforming. Others, quieter ones, seemed unsure, but no one stood up for her. One member, a younger guy named Evan, started noticing how often her name came up in meetings. He had his doubts but kept quiet, afraid of losing his position. Meanwhile, Rachel began documenting every visit, every notice, every comment. Her military training had taught her to prepare before taking action. She wasn't going to be bullied off her land. Still, she couldn't ignore the unease growing in her gut. Someone on the board seemed to have a personal interest in her case, digging into old records, even questioning her property's purchase details. Then came the anonymous letter, no return address, no signature. Just 7 words written in all caps. Asterisk, Wallow, you don't belong here. Leave ye NOW asterisk. Rachel held the anonymous letter in her hand, her fingers gripping it tighter than she realized. She'd faced hostile waters, command pressure, and high-stakes missions. But this felt different. This wasn't just about zoning rules or chickens. This was about intimidation, and whoever sent that note knew exactly how to get under her skin. She installed security cameras the next morning, not just to protect her farm, but to keep her son safe. He was starting to notice the tension too, asking why certain neighbors didn't wave anymore, or why Mom kept glancing at the driveway when a car slowed down. She told him it was nothing, but she knew better. At the next HOA meeting, Rachel showed up early and sat quietly at the back. The room filled with murmurs as she entered. The board chair, Mr. Leland, a retired lawyer with a reputation for being by the book, paused when he saw her. The agenda was routine, but the tension in the room was thick. When the compliance concerns, outside that night, under a dim porch light, she spotted a figure near her barn, someone ducking into the trees. She ran, but by the time she reached the edge of the woods, they were gone. Only a fresh boot print remained in the mud. Rachel stared at the boot print, her breath fogging in the cool night air. It wasn't one of hers. She knew every inch of her land, every step she and her son took. Whoever had been there wasn't just watching, they'd gotten close. Too close. She took a photo of the print and marked the spot with a stick, but by morning, the rain had washed it away. Still, she knew what she saw, and now it wasn't just a property dispute, it was personal. Later that week, a city inspector showed up unannounced. He claimed he was responding to a tip about unpermitted structures and animal sanitation concerns. Rachel invited him to walk the property, calmly answering questions and showing paperwork. But something about the visit felt off. He kept glancing at his phone, as if waiting for confirmation or instructions. After he left, Rachel checked her gate camera. A car she didn't recognize had parked across the street minutes before his arrival, same one that had passed her house slowly 3 times the day before. The second twist came the next day when she reviewed old emails from when she first bought the property. Buried deep in the correspondence with the developer was a name she hadn't thought about in years: Dale Leland. The same Leland who now chaired the HOA. Back then, he was part of the group that denied her original request to purchase the larger plot she'd wanted, saying it wasn't available. Now she began to wonder if it ever was. Rachel didn't sleep much after connecting the dots. The name Leland wasn't just a coincidence. It was a thread that pulled the whole story tighter. She dug deeper, filing public records requests, reading minutes from past HOA meetings, and searching land development records. What she found confirmed her gut feeling. Years ago, Leland had lobbied to buy the land Rachel's farm now sat on. His proposal was rejected due to zoning conflicts. Shortly after, Rachel, recently returned from service, was offered a limited version of the same parcel at a much higher rate. It all started making sense. The complaints, the relentless inspections, the anonymous threats. Leland had never wanted her there, and when she stood her ground, she became a target. Rachel knew it was time to act. She filed a formal complaint with the city and hired a land use attorney. Her documentation, photos, letters, recordings, timestamps, was airtight. At the next HOA board meeting, her attorney joined her. Calmly but firmly, they presented evidence of harassment, misuse of authority, and a clear conflict of interest involving Leland's failed land deal. The room went quiet. One by one, the board members looked at Leland, then at each other. By the end of the week, Leland had resigned. The city dismissed the false complaints, and the HOA dropped all pending violations. Rachel had won. But just as peace settled over the farm again, a new envelope arrived, this time from a private developer. Inside was a generous cash offer for her land, and a note, asterisk, "We're still watching." Asterisk. Rachel didn't take the offer, not even for a second. She folded the letter, slid it into a drawer with the rest of the threats and official notices, and got back to feeding the goats. This land wasn't just dirt and fences, it was healing, legacy, and a second chance. She'd fought too hard to give it up now. Her son, once confused by the tension, was back to riding his bike through the garden paths, chasing chickens, and laughing without worry. Rachel didn't take the offer, not even for a second. She folded the letter, slid it into a drawer with the rest of the threats and official notices, and got back to feeding the goats. This land wasn't just dirt and fences, it was healing, legacy, and a second chance. She'd fought too hard to give it up now. Her son, once confused by the tension, was back to riding his bike through the garden paths, chasing chickens, and laughing without worry. The new HOA board quietly updated its rules, adding protections for small-scale farming and clearer boundaries for enforcement. Avon, the younger board member who once stayed silent, stepped into a leadership role and later apologized to Rachel in person. It didn't erase what had happened, but it mattered. Rachel kept the cameras up and her records organized, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. She understood now that standing your ground, especially when you do it quietly, can shake the strongest walls. For her, the farm was never about rebellion, it was about peace. But when that peace was threatened, she didn't fold. She stood tall, as a mother, a farmer, and yes, a former Navy commander. And now, her story stands as a reminder: never underestimate quiet strength.